Welcome back everybody. Hello, this is episode number 1 and today we're going to be learning how to create our first Bukkit plugin. This plugin is going to print a random greeting into the console each time the server is downloaded. Now if you didn't get your program set up in episode 0, which was released a few days ago, you need to head there now via the link in the description. This is all the downloads you need, a full tutorial, and it's only short, so you should be ready to go very shortly. Now before we get started with our first plugin, I want to explain the concepts in Java. When I discuss this series with lots of developers that I work with and people that I just generally code with, it became evident that the problem of most tutorials is that while people understand how to code, they don't understand why they're doing what they're doing and the advantages of certain things, which means they can end up doing the wrong thing at the wrong time, and while it still might work, it's certainly not the most efficient or something that will look good if you ever go to get a job in development. So I want to explain something called object-oriented programming. Java is an object-oriented language, which means that we use objects as the basis of our code. And now each object is like a 3-part chest. It's got a name which just identifies it, so in Bukkit this might be player for example. It then contains several variables. They're just static attributes, for example, a player's speed or their name. Finally, it contains functions, and in Java we call those methods, but in many other languages such as PHP, these are called functions, and these contain the dynamic operations that our object can perform. This system is very useful because we could create 2 players with different names or different speeds, but we'd only need one box to contain them, we'd only need one template, we wouldn't need to keep recoding it every time a new player joined. Boxes in Java are called classes, but classes are just simple TXT files. They've just got a few modifications, they are formatted as Java would expect, and of course they're not used as TXT files. Now we're going to get into our project, so thanks for bearing with me on that bit, but I just want to bear in mind that we're going to be going back to this episode after episode, and if you didn't understand any of that, go back, watch it again, look at the visualization on your screen, because it's a really important concept to grasp. The great advantage of Java and why it is so easy to use across a variety of platforms, and why Java is so amazing at creating big systems with lots of objects and instances of objects, is that it's so easy because it's object orientated, and in fact many programming languages nowadays are object orientated, but some still aren't, and Java is one of the ones that is. But it's just so useful, and it will mean that we can speed up our development so much. So if you didn't understand any of the concepts, you might want to post a comment down below or do a little bit more research on the basics of object-oriented programming, because it is very useful and will help you along with the rest of this tutorial series. Okay, hello there and welcome back. We are now ready to get started with our project. As you can see, I've got open IntelliJ IDEA, which is our IDE, an intelligent development environment, which will help us with our code and autocomplete any errors. It's basically going to keep trying to compile the plugin, and if it notices that anything is wrong, it will tell us before we actually get to exporting our project. So let's create our project. All you need to do is click the Create New Project button here, and you should see this dialog window open, which will be on my screen any second. Now, if you take a look at this, you can see we have to create a new project. Java should be selected. If it isn't, just click here. And now we have to select a project SDK, a software development kit. This is what Java provides, which tells a program how Java should be written, and that allows us to build our project. If you don't have one, what you need to do is hit New. Here you want to push plus JDK. Once you've got this, you need to navigate to wherever this is stored. Usually this will be in C, Program Files, Java, and then JDK 1.7 for Java 1.7. This is what I recommend as it's supported by the most servers, or 1.8 if you're just using this for servers run on your home PC. Now if you don't have this, that's fine. You can go to my website, there'll be a link down in the description, and you can download this absolutely free. And once you've got that installed, just come back here, hit this refresh button, and you should be able to see your JDK there. Now make sure to hit that refresh button as I said, click OK, and we're ready. You can now select it here. You don't need any additional frameworks just yet, we'll learn about those in the future, and you now want to hit the next button. You'll then see that we can create it from a template, but we don't want to do this, so I'm actually going to make this window a bit smaller so you can see it, and hit next. Now we need to set up a project name. I'm going to actually call this, I don't know, we can call this whatever we like, but we'll call this our first plugin. Alright, so we've got that written out, and we now want to hit the finish button. This is going to create a folder on our desktop, as you can see it here, our first plugin, and it's actually going to begin creating all the necessary files that we need. It's actually loading up on my other screen, so I'm going to move it over here so that you can see exactly what we are doing. Right, I'm back everybody, apologies for that. And as you can see, all we now have is our first plugin created inside our desktop or whatever folder you specified. We plus this, you can see we actually have a .idea folder. This is nothing to do with Java. Java doesn't create this. This is simply a folder made by IntelliJ, which stores data about your project so that if you send it to anybody, they can also open it in IntelliJ. And you've also got a .yml file, which is the same. Now what we're going to do is make a package. These are like big lorries or folders, and this is what we put our boxes or classes inside. So what we do is we right click here, we hit this new button, and then we hit the package button. A package is literally just a folder with a nice name. You really don't need to remember that. Now the naming convention for these, Java is a lot about conventions. I was talking about object-oriented programming. Conventions are things that most developers do, you're expected to do so that it's easily recognizable, but you don't have to do. It's not going to break if you don't do it, but it's strongly, strongly recommended. Now the convention for naming your packages, your folders where you store things, is me.yourname.yourname of your project. So this, for example, for me, would be me dot Oliver versus Creeper, and a dot just creates a subfolder, so a folder inside me, and this is going to be called Oliver versus Creeper. We're then going to put another dot, and we're then going to put the name of our project, which will be first plugin. If you've got a website, you can also use the reverse of the website. So for example, mine might be uk.co.oliver versus Creeper. That's fine as well. Make sure you put your name of your project at the end. But when you're doing your own work, I generally just do this because it's easy to identify as being the work of me. We're then going to right click inside our package and create a new object. Remember that objects are called classes, so we'll just create a new Java class, we'll give it a name, and I'm going to name mine plugin. Remember, everything is to do with objects, and this object is going to be our plugin object that contains the plugin, so we're simply going to call it plugin. Once you've done that, everything should now be working perfectly. Now what we want to do is actually add some more things, but I want to explain to you what this does beforehand. As you can see, we have a package method. This says me.oliver versus Creeper.first plugin. This literally just tells us this object is always going to be inside this package, and I'm actually going to comment that there for you. So as you can see, this line simply says you're in the following package, me.oliver versus Creeper.first plugin, and note that anything in Java has to end with a semicolon. We then have this method, this public class main. So what this is saying is that this object is public. Anybody can look inside this object and find out information about this object, its name, which is simply plugin, and the fact that it is a class. So I'm going to put a comment there as well. So as you can see, that is now there. Now in Java, everything that you do has to go inside these curly braces. These curly braces simply identify that there is things inside it. So in this case, all of your class is in between here. Now what you see here is I'm actually doing single line comments. These are completely ignored by Java, and so they're fine. If I was to get rid of these, this would no longer be a comment, it would be a line, and as you can see, we actually get something here that says class or interface expected. So it's saying it's expecting either an interface, which I'll cover later, or a class, and as you can see, we don't have a class, so it's expecting this to be put inside these curly braces, but I'm going to comment that back out. Java no longer reads it. Now if you want to do a multiple line comment, that is also fine. All you have to do is go down a few lines and then write like so. You want a slash, then an asterisk, and all you need to do is hit your enter key, and as you can see, it will generate the multi-line comment. You can write as many lines as you want. And Java really doesn't care. You can write whatever you want in here. You can even write an entire Java plugin inside these comments and it won't get read. It will just stay there, hover there, and float. Now what we want to do is actually add Bukkit. Now, I'm going to provide a link to the following file inside the description on my website. I'm making a page for each of these plugin tutorials and you'll be able to find it there. So what you need to do is download that file. It will just be called Bukkit API, and this is the API, the Application Programming Interface. What this is a collection of objects that you can access. You can say, hey, could you please give me a broadcaster object, and it will give you one instance, one version of that, one type of that object, one instance of it. My folders and my files are stored inside my J directory, my development directory, and my libraries directory, and as you can see in here, we actually have Bukkit 1.7.9. Yours will be called Spigot API, but I actually made this before they actually began implementing the new Spigot system for 1.8, but this will still work. Luckily, because it's an API, all the code gets changed inside the API, and we don't have to change our code when it updates, so you can use any version of this. I'm going to hit OK, and it will say which module would you like to apply it to. We're going to apply it to our first plugin module. We're going to put it into everything in that package. We're going to hit the apply key. We're going to hit the OK key. And as you can see, we now have this imported. You will probably notice that nothing has actually happened. And the way to fix this is we want to say this object, this plugin, is actually a sub-object. So say, for example, if you had jam, you might have a jam, but then you might have sub-objects which are marmalade and strawberry. Today we're having a plugin object, but this is actually an extension of the Java plugin method. So to tell Java this, what we do is hit extends, and then the keyword Java plugin. When you type this, it will actually ask you where you want to import it from. And you can see what you have here is it's saying, oh look, there's a class inside Java plugin, inside the container, the package, org.bukkit.plugin.java. If we import that, it gets added as an import line here, and it's now imported. Remember that we have a semicolon at the end of everything. Now that we've imported that, our class is a subclass of Java plugin. So if Bukkit ever goes looking for a Java plugin, it will say, oh look, this isn't a Java plugin, this is a plugin, but I know it's of type Java plugin, so it's okay to use it. This is essentially creating different subtypes of our object. Remember what I said, objects are so important in Java. Now to do this code is going to be very simple. What we're actually going to do is create a method. Remember when I was discussing this earlier, a method contains the dynamic operations a class can do. So what we're actually going to go down 2 lines. It's always good to leave space between your code. And we're going to create a method. Now I'm actually going to open up my planner because I want to make sure we get this done nicely. I'm going to make sure I put lots of comments into this for you so that when you look at this on my website, you can look at absolutely everything, what it does, how it does it, and make sure it all works. So what we're going to do is create one method. This is a public method. You always have to say whether a class and a method is public or private. So we're going to say that this is public. Now public simply means anybody that comes to the plugin object is allowed to use this. If I stumble upon this plugin, I can call this method. We're going to call it void, and that simply means it can't return anything. Because if somebody comes into our plugin, calls this method, asks it to run this script, we're not going to say anything back. You have different return types, which I'll get into shortly. We're going to give this the name, the modifier, on enable. Now you can see that this follows the same structure as up here. We say what type it is, what accessibility it is. We say what it is or what it returns, and then we say the name. We then have a set of double brackets. Now the onEnable method is called by Bukkit, and it never has anything inside the double brackets. The double brackets say what we need to run this method. Now to run this method we don't need anything, we just need to be told to run it. So we just leave those double brackets empty. We then put some curly braces because, like I said, everything that needs to contain more code has curly braces to show that it's inside this, to store it. Now inside here we're going to actually access a method. Now to access a method you put the package name to begin with. So hey, I want to look inside the package, which is Bukkit. As you can see, this is inside org.bukkit, and that actually gets imported for us. And then I say, oh, I want to do the get server method, and as you see this returns a class called server. And then inside the server method we can do anything that we wish. For example, here I'm going to go get logger, and this returns a logger instance, and I'm then going to type .info, and as you can see this takes a string message. So inside here they've put the string MSG, and they've said if anybody goes into the logger class and calls the info method, I'd like them to please specify a message. So what we can do inside here is simply type our message. But remember that we actually made our plugin class extend Java plugin. So what we're actually doing is creating a subclass of Java plugin, and Java plugin already has a method which actually calls this, but it adds a prefix to say what plugin we're calling this from. So to call this instead, all we have to type is get logger. We don't have a method inside here that does it, but you can see it slowly loaded that up because it realized, oh, we're inside a Java plugin, we're of type Java plugin, and all Java plugins can do this. And so we do get logger.info, and we can now simply type a string message. As you can see, we have to put something inside these curly braces. Something is needed to run it. And in this case, we're going to specify a string of characters all joined together, a word or a sentence. And inside here, we specify that this is a string by putting 2 pairs of double quotes. And we're then going to write a message. I'm just going to write, "Hello there, our plugin is working." Awesome, so that's now there, and that is literally your first ever Bukkit plugin. Now something else Bukkit requires to run is something called the plugin.yml file. YML is simply another language for writing code. It's a human readable language, so basically it's much easier to read than other languages, and it's used by Bukkit to store configuration about things. So to create this, we just go here, we go new, we go file, and we enter the name of the file. For this, it's plugin.yml. Now, if you do get a pop-up dialog here that asks you how to open the document, you want to select text document. This is simply because you've never used a .yml file before and your computer doesn't know how to handle it. Now, there are certain things that are required by this. One of these is name, so we're going to give our plugin a name. It also requires a version. Now, this is a double value, and a double value is a number with decimals, so we're going to use 1.0. And finally, it needs to know what container to look in to find the plugin that it wants to run. And so this is specified with the main keyword. Inside here, we simply put the package that we specified here, which is me.oliver_creeper.firstplugin, followed by another dot, and we're going looking for inside here, we're going inside here, and we're finding the plugin class, which starts with a capital P. Now remember how I said that everything works in objects, so what this is going to do, whenever it tries to run our plugin, it's going to say, okay, we're trying to run first plugin version 1.0, this can be in any order by the way. Okay, let's look in me, let's look in Oliver_Creeper, let's look in first plugin, let's look in plugin. Oh, here's plugin. It will create a new instance of this, and it will say, hello there, our plugin is working, because as soon as Bukkit loads it, it calls this method. And we could even create an infinite loop. What we could actually do is inside our onEnable method, we could call our own onEnable method. This is literally all they do. They just get a method and call it, so we can call it ourselves. And as you can see here, we actually see a little icon saying that this is going to be a recursive call. It's going to call forever, and we're going to get spammed with hello there, our plugin is working. Well, this is how you do a plugin, but you're probably wondering, how can I put this on my server? It doesn't look ready just yet. What you need to do is hit File, Project Structure, and you want to define how this is going to export. You want to hit the Artifacts button, you want to hit the plus button, the jar button, and from modules with dependencies. So we're using a template from our module. We don't need to specify the main class because we did that in our plugin.yml. So we just hit the OK key, and then what we do is we click on Bukkit and we remove it. The reason we're removing Bukkit is because we're not running our plugin on our own. It's going to be loaded by Bukkit, so we don't need to include Bukkit because it's already been included. Now what we want to do is add our plugin.yml file because it isn't included by default. So we just want to add that here, hit OK, and as you can see, now every time we build our plugin, it's going to build everything inside of the our first plugin folder, which you can see over here includes this, and it also includes the plugin.yml. This is the makeup of our first plugin.jar. We also need to specify where we want this to end up, so we're going to put this in our desktop folder, and we're going to call this our first plugin.jar. All we need to do is hit apply, hit OK, and that is now set up. Now anytime we want to build our plugin, we can simply hit the build key, the build artifacts key, and then the build key under action. That's going to tell it to build the project. So now every time we do that, it's going to build a new version of the jar, put everything in it that is needed, and we'll be ready to make our first plugin. I'm not going to test this on camera because I know that this works, but if you do have any problems, feel free to leave a comment down below or to email me, dev@oliver_creeper.co.uk, and I will get back to you as soon as I can to help you with this plugin tutorial series. Now, this is the end of episode number 2. Thanks so much for watching. Episode number 1, in fact, because I called episode number 1 episode 0 because it was simply set up and it wasn't doing any coding. Now note that unlike other tutorials, I'm going to be a little bit slower in this series because I really want to make sure that what we do is get high quality from this series. So I'm going to be taking my time. I'm going to be really delving into Java and not just Bukkit, and I'm going to be making sure we learn as much as we can. But I've been Oliver versus Creeper. You've been watching my development series. We've just made our first plugin.jar, which you can upload to your test server by going into your test server, into the plugins folder, dragging this in and then running the server with the start server script. You can then connect to that server using the IP local host, all one word. That's literally it. If you join that server, you'll be able to see our first plugin in action. But actually using this getlogger.info method, all it's going to do is write that message into that black console. So there's not even any need to join the server. I've been Oliver versus Creeper. You've been watching my plugin development series. Thanks for watching. But for now, goodbye.